Okay. Okay. Simple interest. So we'll go over this concept. Whoa, that was a terrible line. We'll go over this concept. We have what looks like four variables. Um, and any of these can technically be a variable amount, but usually what happens in a question is they give you the amount of one of them. And what we want to do is kind of define what the
Yeah.
So A is usually amount, UNT, okay? Um, it'll sometimes be written as, I personally prefer to write it as this, FV, standing for future value.
Oh yeah.
Okay, I find this better because it connects to when you do compounding interest, when you do annuities. This is a term that you'll use over and over again. So I'm going to call amount or FV, future value. Okay,
Okay.
because we can also find amounts for like past values.
You haven't heard of clock being shut down or
No,
anything?
no, no. P is usually known as a principal. AL is like your pal. LE, I think, is the amount. It's essentially the original amount, okay? Another way of referring to principal, so we'll do future value, is present value. So I'm going to call it that one also. PV, which is like pretty close to it, we call present. Both of these are values. So future value, present value, okay? R is commonly an interest rate, okay? Rate, and then T is very commonly time.
Yeah.
Okay, so those ones are a little more straightforward. Some people will call I an interest rate, but I is usually an interest rate referred to when we're doing compounding interest, and then R is an even more defined part. So we'll start with these, and then we'll talk about these ideas. A really simple example is the concept of $100. So we have $100 and we have an interest rate, we'll say maybe they're going to give us 10%, okay? So we have a 10% interest rate, and then we're going to do that for maybe 10 years, okay? We'll say 10 years. You know what? I won't use a 10 again, 5 years, just so we can delineate between all of these, okay? So the very first question is, what are these? Like, which of these variables are which, if we were to define what they are? So our $100 here, this is known as your
The
principal amount.
principal, yeah.
Exactly, okay? I'm going to call it our present value. So I'll give you another set of this formula can also be this. FV is equal to PV times R times T. So kind of like this, okay? Simple interest is also a type of interest that really doesn't exist in the real world. Any financial institutions really don't tend to use this. If you're going to do a bank account or something like that, it's going to be it's going to be a compounding interest. Leave me alone. Get out of here. Get out. Get out. Get out. So this will be your present value or your principal. The 10% is the rate.
Right.
That's whatever the rate is going to be, and this is going to be our time.
Mhm.
Okay, so we can simply calculate simple interest by really just looking at, look, we have 5 years. What is 10% of 100? Well, if I go about calculating this, I turn my 10% into a decimal. Okay, so I'm going to say or 0.1. 10% of 100 we can multiply to take, and that turns out to be 10. So the interest rate per year, and they'll tell you what it is per year. You do got to make sure your units are right. Like if it was 10% monthly, and they asked over 5 years, well then that changes because we're getting 10% 12 times a year. So we just got to make sure our units are in the same spot. In this case, let's say it's 10% yearly, okay, or annually is a really common term for it also. This is $10 every year. According to simple interest, what we would do is you would just add this 5 times over 5 years, okay? So we go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. According to this, we're going to make $50 in interest, okay? And then because we originally put in 100, we're going to add that principal in, and we get 150. Now, this was not a very algorithmic function or equation to write, but this would be an intuitive way of looking at it. We get $150. We can use this as our formula to calculate it. So A, which is the amount or the future value, what will the future value be? Well, we take our principal, this is our P, R, and our T, right? Our principal happens to be $100, so we'll say 100. Our interest rate, like we said, we'll do it in green. We change it into a decimal, is 0.1, okay? And then time happens to be 5 years, so it's really what ends up being is how many periods are going to pass, right? We're going to say 5 periods or 5 years are going to pass. From here, we just use a simple calculator to do this. Let me see if I have Desmos calculator handy right now. I can get one. No, that's not it. Uh-oh, the computer's shutting down on me here. Let's try this one. That's a little better. Desmos. Sorry, should have this up and ready.
No, that's all good.
Scientific calculator. 100 times 0.1 times 5. 100, 0.1 times 5. And there we go. We got that $50 that we worked out.
Yeah.
If we want to know the simple interest, this is, I apologize, I wrote that formula wrong. This is the interest earned. This is your I. Your amount would be your interest plus your original amount, okay? So your amount, your future value amount is your present value amount plus that. So we say future value is your interest rate plus your principal, which we can call P in this case if we want. What they'll commonly do is we'll rewrite this formula. I is equal to PRT. So we'll say we replace I with PRT and plus P. We have a P in both of these terms here, so we can actually common factor this out. We can say P and then RT plus 1. And this will give us our future value when we go to calculate it. So sorry, I apologize. This was our interest rate one, and this will give us our future value amount. Our principal, like we said, was 100. Okay. Our rate, like we said, was 0.1. Our time was 5. And then multiply by 5. And then we add the value of 1. And 1 is essentially taking the place of, like, the original amount is going to stay. That's what that represents as a value. So when we go to work this out, we get 100 times 5 times 0.1 is actually going to be 0.5 plus 1. 0.5 plus 1 is going to be 1.5. And 1.5 times 100 is going to be 150, which is the exact thing we found up here. Okay? So simple interest we can intuitively use. Here's our formula for like the future value of it, PRT plus P, or P then bracket RT plus 1. Okay? Again, not a very common style of interest rate. We don't tend to use it much because there's no compounding. So essentially, it's just something that's paying out $10 every time. Like a job is almost simple to this. It'd be something where you up front, you have to buy a uniform or something like that, or they got to pay for you up front, and then they give you a certain amount every single time, and it doesn't really change. Okay.